My name is Patrick Reynolds of the Oneida County History Center. We are here today to talk about the curious case of Moody Peabody and the Great Fire of Utica from 1837. This research came about while I was preparing to give a talk at this little building which is in downtown Utica. It's called the Proctor Memorial Building, and it was built at the site of Baggs Hotel. So this is a scene of Baggs Square, about 1850, with Baggs Square on the left, or Baggs Hotel, and the square is in the center of the screen. And as I was doing research on the Baggs Hotel, I came across this curious auction online of a painted fireboard which depicted the Great Fire of Utica in Utica, New York in 1837. And this was a folk art painting on wood, which was a decorative fire screen. These were used to put in front of your fireplace, keep the birds out, keep the drafts coming and blowing the ashes or the smell of the fireplace. The Great Fire of Utica, New York, of the year 1837. And with a little cleaning up on Photoshop, you can see the sign on Baggs Hotel on the left, American Hotel, and the great fire that is going on. See the little men with their pumper and their leather top hats, carrying very primitive runaway horse. We got a lady jumping off the top of the roof. It was a real fire. And if you go in the basement of the History Center, you can find a little map which depicts contemporaneously where the fire was in downtown Utica. The fire commenced in the morning about 2 o'clock in a wood building on the corner of Broad and Genesee Street. The wind was very strong from the east, burned all of the above, laid down except for the 6 mentioned as saved. And there's quite a few accounts of the fire in the newspapers, and also Pomeroy Jones gives the lengthiest account. March 31st, the Great Fire occurred, largest which has ever occurred. Commenced at number 53, the lower corner of Genesee Street and Broad, in a row of old wooden stores which extend down Genesee Street halfway to the square. They were quickly swept away, and the brick stores below were soon in flames. Their contents, not burned in them, were piled in front of the center of the street. There being a strong east wind, the sheet of flame was carried nearly across Genesee Street. Soon the fine brick stores on that side were in flames. Large quantities of goods which had been placed in the center of the street melted away under the arch of fire above them. Soon the few buildings on Broad Street west of John and John below Broad were in ashes, excepting the fireproof store of John Street, E.B. Sherman. On the east side, the fire extended down, including the stores fronting the square, except those on John Street. On the west side of Genesee Street, the fire extended to number 54, destroying 10 stores, 4-story temperance house kept by William Clark. On Whitesboro Street, everything was destroyed east of the brick dwelling. On the corner of Bouchard, including the Bouchard's Inn upon the site of the McGregor House, small buildings and fixtures in the city garden. He concludes, the loss for a place of its size was immense, but in the end the fire, as is generally the case, was the means of greatly improving that part of town. He, of course, is referring to the first buildings in Utica. This is 1830, so there's still a lot of log cabins and early buildings that went up in flames. So if you take this map and scale it down, you can overlay it onto a print of Utica. This is a print from after the fire, but this indicates where the fire was. And I wondered, this is after it's been rebuilt, but wondered what it was like before. So I asked our volunteer, do we have a map of Utica from about 1837? And she produced, Mary Bottini, a miniature map of Utica from 1836. It is indeed miniature. Built to be the size to fit inside of the Utica City Directory of the time period, which were sort of like the phone books of the time. It lists the people and their addresses and usually what they did for a living. The detail on the map is quite nice. For how small it is, miniature map, yes it is. Population of Utica in 1835 was only 10,000 people. Probably one of the earliest depictions of the railroad coming into town. This was the Schenectady and Utica Railroad. Has the Erie Canal, which recently had opened, going through the center of town. And to figure out where the fire was, I should note that the railroad tracks end at Genesee Street, and the little building marked with the X at the tip of the triangle is the end of the line for the railroad for just maybe a year or two. But if you climbed on top of it, there was a cupola you could look out and look up Genesee Street, and that would give you the view from the car house looking in the direction of the fire. Cleaned it up with a little Photoshop retouching. You can see Baggs Hotel, American Hotel. So the question that arises, see how these two pictures look amazingly the same? Mm-hmm. They're taken essentially from the same location on top of the train station. So the question is, who made this map, and is there any connection between these two? M.M. Peabody, engraved and sold. Who is M.M. Peabody? Never heard of him. Is there a connection? So Moody Morse Peabody was born in Peterborough, New Hampshire. He apprenticed as an engraver and a watchmaker. Of course, the engravers made printing plates. This is one of his first ones, which was a biblical scene. The unjust sentence of the Jews against Jesus Christ and the Savior of the world. Multicolor. His first son was named DeWitt Clinton, after that guy in New York who built the ditch. He soon published a map of Massachusetts, Connecticut, and Rhode Island in 1819. He did the design for a Freemason's apron, which was a decorative apron they would wear at their ceremonies and rituals. Sometimes not so flattering depictions. This is a book plate from 1823 showing George Washington. Map of Vermont by 1824. Then he moves to Utica in 1828. He advertised himself as an engraver, printer, historical portraits, and landscapes, just as he was doing in New York. And he soon published a map of the United States, such as it was at the time. You can see the states don't go all the way across the United States. Engraved and published by Peabody in Utica, 1831. Of course, he shows the Grand Canal going across New York, and even has the profiles of the canal. He did a map of Auburn in 1834. This town was starting to grow rapidly because of the canal and the turnpike, and the map was done to encourage people to come settle. He illustrated a lot of buildings, some fancy houses for the time. published by Hagman and Markham, but done by Peabody. Pro bono publico, for the good of the people. Also included on the map is the engraving of the Auburn State Penitentiary, which was the big prison built in 1816. So it seems that Peabody's doing pretty well as an engraver. Got a variety of products, and he's working for other people. We still don't know if there's a connection between these two paintings, because it seems remarkably similar. So did Moody see the Great Fire of Utica in 1837? No. A lot of times historians are wishy-washy and kind of speaking clouded language and don't declare anything, but to understand that, we're going to talk about engraving. So engraving is the creation of copper plates by little tools. You can see it's backwards. Copper is relatively soft, so you can scratch various lines and dots to make pictures. It's very fine work with sharp styluses. You essentially can trace other pictures. They had an interesting contraption they had at their desk on the right. You can see a light diffuser, and he's working in front of the bright window, so you can see this very, very fine work, which again is made into printing plates and printed. Moody also, in his ad in Utica in 1830s, noted that he was a banknote engraver. And this is real fine detail on a very small scale. If you didn't know, banknotes were used as species or money for the general public. There was no standardized federal currency yet, except maybe some coins. So Moody got arrested for counterfeiting banknotes for the Bank of Warsaw. 1831. Printing plates were found at his home, under his bed in Utica, or on Lafayette and John Street, which I drive through every morning, right past where his house used to be. He was sentenced to the state prison in Auburn, 1831 to 1838. 7 years. So, did Moody see the Great Fire of Utica? No, because he was in prison. And you couldn't work while you were in prison. The system did make people work, but you couldn't do your own work. You were like building furniture, they made shoes, they would, chip rocks. So wait a minute. All three of these maps were published while he was in prison. Were the printing plates done ahead of time and they came out later? We don't really know. But one thing we do know, that it was a family business. So not only did Moody be an engraver, his wife did, and his son. This is from the 1834 directory. DeWitt is a copper plate printer, and he boards at Sarah Ann, who was his mother, who's also listed as a woman copperplate printer. They moved to Mary Street. So either they printed the plates or they finished the plates, but they managed to keep the business in operation while he was in prison, including getting paid. This is out of the Auburn newspaper, that Peabody was getting paid for working on the map, and D.C. the Sun was getting paid for printing the map, all while he was in prison. Maybe these were old bills being paid. Printed 200 of the Auburn map. Very curious. Moody was released in 1838. Goes back to Utica. Arrested again. Same charge. Same plates. Counterfeiting notes of the Bank of Warsaw. This is the first place I learned the research doesn't always go in order, and I found this one first that said he got arrested. And oh, by the way, it will be remembered he was sentenced 8 years since for the same offense. So Moody's rather chronic counterfeiter. 8 years the first time, and 9 months the second time.
Oh, no.
Remember his son named
DeWitt
Clinton Peabody. He now goes by the DW. He lives over in Ithaca. And, well, you guessed it. He got arrested in 1839.
Warsaw bank notes?
A wildcat bank distracted. So he had been working for another map publishing company, and he'd been caught with a large amount of redback bills on the Bank of Warsaw. So this is the same printing plate. They were found secreted in his room, and he has connections to other in the business. He had hereto otherwise been doing his residence here, sustained a fair reputation. "23 years old, sentenced to 5 years in Auburn. Eventually pardoned and released after not too long. The same prison that they did so well on their little map with their illustration, because perhaps they knew it so well, who knows. So Moody's not in prison at the time. What does he do? Like any good criminal from around here, he's moving to Canada. Oh, soon after, the whole family was arrested in this place on the charge of being engaged in an extensive system of forgery upon some of the banks of the state of New York. This time he was engraving the Bank of Rome notes. And Moody, his wife, a son who was only 13. This is a different one because DeWitt was in prison, but they all got arrested. He was released from prison after 10 months served. The copper plates were ordered to be destroyed. Thank you. So this is the third time. And he's out of prison and in Canada, and both he and his son are working together to have an engraving establishment. Apparently there were some problems with DeWitt, and it reverted back to the father. And Moody died in Wilton, Ontario in 1866. Never again publishing any of those great maps. And the newspaper summed it up quite nicely. It is a singular instance of misapplied ingenuity. The same capacity, rightly directed, would have enabled him to live respectably. Who's that? Webster defines curiosity as a strong desire to see something novel or to discover something unknown, either by research or inquiry. A man's curiosity leads him to view the ruins of Baalbek, investigate the origin of Homer, discover the component parts of a mineral, or the motives of another actions. We did. So the past didn't go anywhere. On exhibit at the museum is a leather fire bucket, which was at that fire. The original map engraved by Mr. Peabody. The past is right here, right now. Stay curious. The end.
Nice.